It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Kink Consultant. I am here with a man that I found through TikTok, and he is definitely kinky, I know that much, but we also have some interesting viewpoints on kink in general, and I was like, I want to talk to this guy. I was fortunate enough that he invited me onto his submissive group to speak to a lot of submissives that he meets with, I think, on a weekly or monthly basis, and that is where we first had our first real-life interaction. So, Tripp Terrier, welcome to the Kink Consultant Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. But when I wanted to introduce you, I was like, I know Tripp as a content creator. I know him as a dominant. But Tripp, how do you refer to yourself?
Thanks for having me. I go by Tripp Terrier. I talk about and share my experience with power exchange and kink theory, which is to say that a lot of the content I make tries to discuss some of the nuances of kink, some of the gray areas, some of the confusing areas, and ask a lot of questions there. In my professional life, you alluded to, I have a mentorship program that's just like the basis of my business. It's a 3-month program where I take mostly submissive types and teach them self-doming and self-subbing with the aim of codifying their power, their free will, and then having the discussions about consent that derives from that power. So that's the main thing I do, in addition to like consulting for authors and such as that. I also, just for the community, am working on an app as a strategist that is going to provide violent criminal background checks and sex offender background checks that are cheap and easily accessible. And it would be just like an app network that's in development right now. I can't really say much more than that, but I've got my hands in a few different things.
A few. You just named a laundry list. I love it. There's so much to talk about, but I think that you really nailed it when you said your online content talks about the gray areas of kink. And I think that's what attracted me to your content so quickly, because I was like, man, he's talking about things I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot barge pole on here, because kink is already so taboo. Not only that, I find that a lot of people get very aggressive, and sometimes that doesn't sit well with my nervous system. I'm like, I'm not here to pick apart titles and things like that. So I love watching your content because you talk about things that very few other people are talking about.
Yeah, I'm in a very privileged position that I get to work in this space full time. And so I don't have to worry about taking this persona to the office. Like, this is my office. And so I definitely have a liberty that allows me to discuss things in depth. And, you know, sometimes it upsets people, and that's fine. But in order to navigate the space, I've only been doing content for a year, literally 12 months. And early on, I was getting accustomed to how TikTok works. And it became really, really apparent to me that I was going to have some really strong boundaries and values, or I'd get sucked into the underbelly temptation of cynicism of social media. So some of the things that I've done is I don't argue with people in my comments. I really don't reply to people hardly ever, because I don't want to make my comment sections on either Instagram or TikTok a contentious place. People fight with each other, but I try not to fight back. I don't want people to see me that way. And it's also not good for me or my time or my mental health. The other thing is I have a hard boundary around spitting out my ideology on my account. My accounts are where my ideas and perspective live, but I do my best not to bring them to other people's accounts, which means I do not comment on other people's posts, really, unless like I'm cheerleading and supporting. But I'm never going to like start a disagreement with somebody else. If I don't agree with them, I just move on.
But I knew I liked you. By the way, I knew I liked you, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but you are describing what you don't do is what was done to me early in my days when I was still finding my feet. And I think that's what I appreciate. I also don't go to other people's comment section and say, well, actually, or XYZ. Social media can be about that, but also someone else's viewpoint is not technically in direct opposition to mine. By putting myself in their comments, I'm creating that structure.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a fascinating example of power exchange. There is a dynamic on the internet when something is said that triggers their insecurity. They are trying to bring the conversation to a playing field that they feel more dominant in. And so they will try to bring my attention to them. And I just put up the wall. I say, no, I don't consent to engaging in this. And so that's for my safety. And also, just the generalization of like, has anyone ever gotten into a conversation in the comment section of a social media app and actually been convinced and changed their life? No, we double down, we hide in our corners, and we get more tribal. And so I just play that tape out and go, am I going to commit the next 2 hours of my day arguing with this random person? Absolutely not. That is not indicative of the way I want to carry myself as a dominant player. And so I try to exemplify it everywhere that I can.
I literally love that. I wish I had talked to you 3 years ago when I started because I'm like, yeah, why didn't I ever just play the tape out? Something that I don't talk about, but there is another kink creator out there who early on, they let me be for a while, but once I hit about 40,000 followers, they just started to come after me, both in my comments and DMs. I would always engage because I do want to learn and I always want to self-check, am I doing something wrong? But eventually after, I don't know, the third, fourth, fifth comment by them or DM, I'm petty and I paid attention. I said, you have never liked, positively engaged, or been positive about anything I've ever done. If I only hear from you when it's negative, you are soon going to become someone whose opinion I don't value at all. I barely valued it in the first place, but my point was, I'm going to stop doing a self-check because hearing from you is just hearing a kinky Karen. You know what I mean? When I saw your videos, I thought of that because I was like, this is someone who's holding true to what he believes. He's talking about it and people can agree or they can move on. Those are their two options. And your page really exemplifies that. And that's why I love going to it. I love following you. I believe you've been taken down from Instagram once or twice though, because I've lost your account a couple of times. At first I was like, did he unfollow me or did like he block me? Because my mind goes there. And then I realized, oh no, he's just victim of the algorithm.
Yeah. And the thing is, when they delete your account, I have no idea why. It could be any of the things that I posted. Like I've gotten an account strike on TikTok for talking about DDLG. And the thing is, my content is rhetorical, it's psychological. Like I only talk about it. I'm not one of those people that is dressing up like a smut book character and doing this salacious kind of content. So I've never understood when and why and how I get marked, but I got kicked off Instagram and I just assume it's for the same DDLG video. But yes, social media is difficult.
That's like my major fear. Every is the social media ban.
Oh, that is the one that I think you and I first connected over. I did a post that said that was talking about DDLG and you had commented on it saying, I can't believe you got away with hashtagging it like DDLG.
I
And
remember saying that.
that was a really popular post. And the thing is, you know, what's wonderful about that is it was such a shower thought. I was at work. I used to work in the film production, so I was on set. And all the post was like, shout out to the LGs. Like, I see you. I love a silly little LG or whatever. And it wasn't getting into any graphic details or like, you know, talking about kink or anything like that. And the community came out of the damn woodworks. So many people that are into that scene were like, I didn't know we were allowed to talk about it on here. Oh my God, my people. Like everyone was like making friends. And it was just really nice that I didn't plan on that. And then
Yeah.
it was one of those moments where you're like, oh yeah, that's why I do this.
I remember that so clearly. Honestly, I don't think I remember it was your account that I said it to, but I remember that was my immediate thought of almost like, can we do this? I'm still too scared, but can we? And I love that you did and answered it for many of us, whether or not that was the thing that
Yeah.
eventually got you kicked off. All right, there's one video I do remember. I had been following you. I loved your content. One of the first things I clocked, though, that I was like, oh, this is going to make people angry. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that. But I did think, oh, he's opening up the door here. Your take is that Doms cannot be brats.
Correct.
I'm putting you a little on the spot here, but can you go through that for me? Like, why can't Doms be brats?
Sure. Yeah, that video has been haunting me for probably the last 6 months or so because people always want to talk about it. There's a range of opinions. And I give people the space to stake their claim in that discussion. I'm totally open to alternative views. And for reference, I have to say, like, I only have ever talked about this on my account. I'm not trying to spread this to anyone else's dynamic. But the criticism I've received always comes back to is maybe we have a different definition of brat, and maybe we have a different definition of how DOMs show up or how power exchange is actually coordinated. And so even to have this conversation, I feel like it's prudent to ask you, how do you view defining a brat?
I do think that as I define it, it'll fall right into your play here of I do believe a brat is a submissive who ultimately wants to challenge and check authority and ultimately wants to lose. They want to be put back in their place. That is their main aim. It is very rarely to actually win and one up. So my theory is it is someone who tests boundaries and pushes for the ultimate goal of discovering the boundary and understanding where they sit within it. Does
Yeah,
that make sense? Like,
I'm with it. I'm with it. Like more or less, I feel the same way. The way I describe it, there's nuanced differences, is I describe bratting as a disciplinarian and authoritarian kink. And so they are somebody that acts in a way that's going to solicit authority and discipline. Now, the claims that I make in regards to DOMs can't be brats is due to the fact that if a submissive is trying to solicit authority, trying to solicit discipline, then how is a Dom from a place of authority going to solicit that same authority? Who are they getting the authority from? Who are they provoking?
Hey Kinksters, if you've ever thought I want to play but I don't even know where to start, I've got you. My personal and completely free BDSM checklist helps you and your partner build a tailored yes, no, and maybe list. You'll figure out what sounds interesting, what actually lights you up, where your desires overlap, and where the sexy adventure begins. It's fun, it's clear, and makes scene planning way easier, whether you're a Dom, sub, or switch. Grab your checklist right now at amandadames.com/BDSM list, or click the link in the show notes.
And so there's a lot of behavior that DOMs can play with that look a lot like bratting, and we can call it brat-like. We can describe it as bratty. However, in terms of role play and identity, I do not believe a Dom can be a brat. I think a brat is a submissive position by definition. And this can splinter off into a lot of different conversations. So I just want to get your feedback on that part.
no, I am pretty much in agreement with you. You're right, because like when my Dom is what I won't be showing him this episode because you are, I do not need this putting against me in my own personal life. But I do think what I describe of, yeah, it's bratty, it's more toying. What I would describe he's doing is toying with me as opposed to bratting, because you're right, as I previously defined it, he's not trying to lose. He's playing cat and mouse with me, and he's always the cat and I'm always the mouse.
Yes, that's a great example because I hadn't thought about this until people started offering me criticism of that statement. But there is an inherent brattiness to the dominant player because they are the player playing with power.
Yeah.
And so, like, in order to play with power in a spicy way, it means you are going to be bending and approaching the threshold of rule breaking, right? The submissive player is in it for that tension. That's the game that we're playing. I mean, we could be more specific. Like there is an inherent rebelliousness that comes with domination. And I think that that gets looked at as bratty. And to that extent, when folks come out and identify as a bratty Dom, I'm like, I'm not asking anybody to stop engaging in the behavior, do it. But I think that there's probably better ways to describe it. And where it really becomes an issue, this conversation happens in a context. I'm a cis heterosexual male, and the domination that I practice exists within the context of a patriarchal society and a capitalistic status structure. And that is one of the elements that we play with. And so when we're talking about rule breaking and the positions that we're holding, it is, without even thinking about it, a reflection of our roles in greater society. And so for me to play with the rules and for me to play with power, the rules are going to be different than if it was a gay couple or a lesbian couple or
a femdom.
Variety of it. Yeah, or a femdom. Like there are common denominators, which we are all under the patriarchal umbrella, but it affects my relationships and my perspective differently than it affects a cis submissive perspective or any other variety. And so we're playing different games under the same arena.
Okay, so I agree with that, playing different games under the same arena. What I also describe it as tangentially about this, I always describe kink like the Christian religion. Christianity has a bunch of different sects and they all believe mostly the same thing, but the specifics are different. And people have gone to war and bombed over the differences in it. And that's what I see play out in the kink community. Like, I was raised Catholic, now I'm Episcopalian. I've switched sides, and it's like all mostly the same thing, different fonts, different definitions sometimes. So you do have to ask that question. I love that you started with like, well, what's your definition of it? Because that's the curiosity being piqued. It's like, okay, well, if we're looking at this through different lenses, describe your lens so we can start there. Do you play with brats? Then I just want to be very clear about this. Not all doms need to play with brats. You have a choice.
I like a dynamic player that can do it all because I need constant novelty in order to bring the best out in me. When things are too structured and too predictable, then I get bored. So I don't get the headspace that I'm looking for. But I just want to circle back on one point in
Please.
regards to the stadium, the power structure and everything. The experience I have that may be different from, say, a femdom or a queer couple is that as a cis heterosexual male dominant, there is a variety of player that does intend to break the rules, except they're doing it out of tyranny. And that is a style of play that is totally valid if it's consensual. But there are options to act out of a tyrannical intention without disclosing it and disguising it as brattiness. And so this is somebody that's inconsistent. They lack accountability and they seem to just always win, right? They're not responsible in that way. And the thing is, I get those DMs. I get the DMs from the women that come to me and say, hey, is this normal? And I go, no, you're being taken advantage of. And so that colors my perspective that I don't think a lot of other folks have seen. And so when I say a brat can't be a dom, one of the core distinctions is because that there is another role to be played that is worthy of the distinction so that submissives can know exactly what dynamic they're getting into and are they consenting to that type of play.
The sub, you're saying, are they consenting to that type of play?
Yeah, like if the dominant is going to brat, not because of just playing with power, but because they want to play a role where they are above the rules. The rules do not apply to them. They want to play Donald Trump. Then that needs to be disclosed and consented to. That's not bratting, even though we could easily look at the actions of like the administration and say like, yeah, you're a bratty little temper tantrum toddler, you know?
Yeah.
They look the same. They look exactly the same. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's the intention and the negotiation behind it. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So I had to get that point out.
No, I'm really glad you did because I'm like, yeah, this is why social media makes it hard though, because you couldn't get that point out exactly like that on social media without the message getting lost in the 90 seconds you have to make the point.
Yeah, I don't know if you have this experience, but when you're making clips and I don't script mine, it just rattle. And then like I'll go back to edit and I'm like, that's not the point I'm trying to make or whatever, but I'm just like upload because I just don't care. And it doesn't matter because no matter what I say, people are going to take it the way that they
are going to take it.
Yeah. So it's just whatever. It's just content.
I wish I could explain to people it's whatever. It's just content. But then you are immediately put on a platform of like, well, you're an educator now. Like I rejected that term for the longest time. And then I had enough people reach out to me and tell me they learned so much from me. And I'm like, well, fuck, even if I reject it, people are looking at me as if I'm an educator. So I have to try. But at the end of the day, it's just content. And people, while we have a responsibility to not turn people into tyrants, it's also like we're just one church you can listen to or one viewpoint. There are others to take in. But yes, early on when I was first making content, I would beat myself up. I would be like, this wasn't clear enough, blah, blah, blah. And then that video would go viral because it spoke to so many people and I was obsessing over things that didn't matter. So I imagine the same thing happens to you. You upload, some things stick. Like, I don't know how much, you said it was a shower thought. Or no, not that video, but your Brat Dom one. Like, you didn't know that would be haunting you months in, but here we are. I love the conversation starter of it.
I started mentoring in AA like 7 years ago. And that was something that I learned where I would try to help sponsees get sober and like impart wisdom or whatever. And it was so confusing that I would like try to hit them with these truths that my sponsors and elders have imparted onto me, and they just weren't hearing the same thing. And that's when I learned that like people are filtering through their own experience and their own insecurities and everything. And the thing that I think is dumb is what they're attaching to, and I just don't get to pick what it is. And then when I started making content early on, somebody said, you just have to get really used to being misunderstood. And that's when I stopped replying to people's criticism in the comments and everything. Like, I'm not going to correct anybody. We're not on the same planet. Like, it just doesn't even matter.
Sorry, who was this genius with this advice? Because I missed this memo. I'm getting it right now for the first time.
Not even somebody I knew. I think I was like TikToking, like how to upload a TikTok. And like,
Okay.
It's just my FYP. I just didn't know anything. And I resonate when I started talking about power exchange on like a more academic level. I put in my bio, I'm not an educator, I'm just sharing my experience. And that was really something that was important to me, especially because I just know how hostile the internet is, and that the only reason anyone wanted me to identify as an educator is so they could invalidate me as an educator and try to strip that from me and be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. How dare you identify as an educator? I'm like, okay, well, I'll just get ahead of it and not identify. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't need that identity. I don't do classes either. I don't do lectures. I'm not on the circuit or any of that. So like, it's not important to me at all.
No, that's really fair. I have done them, but I recognize that the people I speak to are at a different stage in their journey than people who are attending conventions where they're really in it. So I don't do that. I don't call myself an educator, but I don't shy away from it anymore and reject it because I'm like, whether they're going to invalidate me or not. But I feel you. Like, I feel so seen by that. The earlier people trying to call me an educator were the ones who were equally trying to invalidate me, my experience. Luckily, I could have been turned off very early on, though, from it. That's what I'm saying. You just out the gate, you were ready for it. And sort of, I'm going to be misunderstood, and that's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah. To bring this home for the audience, we're not even talking about social media, even though that might be the context here. We're talking about the power dynamics of social media. And these are things that I take home with me. And it was really difficult when I first uploaded my accounts, receiving all that criticism. Like, I know that I'm guilty until proven innocent. Like, people see my account, identify as a straight white male and a dominant, and I'm a predator until I'm not. Like, I know that that's going to be the first impression.
I'm nodding along because I thought the same thing. I said, oh, a male dom. I didn't comment, but I was like, let's pay attention.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's my hurdle to get over. And the question to me is, do I accept that, burden or not? And I did early on, knowing that I was going to be called a lot of names, and then people were comparing me to Andrew Tate and like things that I just never expected would ever happen. And I just didn't even understand the comparisons that they were trying to make. But I just got really heavy on the block button. And the thing is, it was really great experience for me, great practice in my ability to emotionally regulate and to stabilize. And as someone with ADHD, I'm prone to rejection sensitivity, dysmorphia, or disorder, whatever. And so like sometimes when people make that comment, they just hit so dang hard that like, I'm done for the day. Like, I got to cancel meetings. It just really got me. And I had to develop more tools for self-soothing that, as I mentioned, I'm a member of AA. So like, I don't have the vice crutches anymore. I can't just go drink it out. I actually have to sit down with my feelings and really handle it, which is the kind of dom I want to be. So like, all of this was relevant and a great experience.
I could see that. I also ultimately, weighing it all up, would say that I have had a good experience through all of this. I mean, it's made me who I am. There were things I wish I could go back and talk to myself 3 years ago and be like, so the fuck what if they come into your DMs and question who you are and tell you you're being dangerous? I have not had any feedback of anyone coming back and saying you harmed me with this information. So
yeah.
Have you?
No, I haven't, but I think the 2 points to make there. One, everyone's just making it up as they go along. No one knows what the hell they're talking about. And like, I'll be the first to admit, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just making this shit up as I go along.
Because of your lived experience, though.
And that's why I try to just share my experience the best I can. Some people ask me questions outside of my experience, and you have to, make some speculations and try to preface it that way. But the second thing is, it's a fascinating slice of where we are with media literacy and what platforming is and what platforming isn't. And we're trying to like figure that out as a culture, and what responsibility do these voices have. And I think the common perception is that if you have a platform, you're responsible for your audience to some degree. And that comes into direct conflict with my understanding of power and power exchange, in that if I don't have responsibility over somebody, or if I don't have power over somebody and can't make choices for them, then I don't have responsibility over them. Like responsibility, power, and controlling their willpower is all tethered together. So if you take one of those out, the whole thing falls apart. So I don't see how I'm responsible for the actions of somebody that's listening to my content.
I'm so glad, because I loved all of that. I am curious about your thoughts on this. I get personally frustrated when people also want to use media like movies like Baby Girl, Secretary, and 50 Shades of Grey, and both point to how the Dom is wrong. You're saying we're all just figuring it out as we go. That goes for Doms and subs. I hate this idea that the dominant automatically, inherently knows how to be a Dom and they're responsible for the sub. While that's true in like the rules of engagement, playing together, the truth is you have to understand both people are just figuring it out. And it drives me insane when people act like, well, because he's the Dom, he's automatically given this title to be in charge of the person. And it's sort of like, that's not the reality. This is an example of where I'm not explaining it very well. But the truth is, as a sub, I get a lot of heat on my comments about how sometimes it seems like I'm taking the Dom side. And what I'm really trying to do is empower the submissive to understand it is their responsibility to help create the dynamic they want. They do not hand over all power to the point that they need to negotiate aftercare. I do believe that. They need to say, hey, this is the aftercare I need. If you can't give it, I don't want to play with you. And they also just have to realize the dynamic they're looking for and ask the person they're playing with whether or not that aligns. And it's not one-sided. So, like, do you see that when you see Baby Girl or hear about these movies? Do you ever get that feedback of like 50 Shades ruined everything? I don't think it did. I think it brings up important conversation. What ruins things is the perception that the Dom is all-knowing and that you're handing yourself over to a Dom. I think it sets people up for failure and puts them in a dangerous position. So that's the next topic I'm lobbing at you. I would love your opinion on that.
Certainly. I should have been taking notes because a lot of thoughts came up. So first off, on the entertainment front, like let's just call it what it is, entertainment.
Yes.
Right? And there's a reason why when you're watching a TV show or something, you never see somebody take a shit or like do the mundane things of life. It's because it's not entertaining. And so like when you watch Dom sub relationships in the media and they're not doing routine negotiation and consent talks or whatever, it's like, yeah, because that's boring. You know, that's not the meaty stuff that we want to see. So I give media, entertainment media, a lot of grace and leeway. I don't have very high expectations for them. And I also try to frame it for folks that are new to the scene. We call it a scene because it is parroting a stage play scene. Okay. A lot of scenes will go by a 3-act structure, and the negotiation and the consent talks happen before anyone says, all right, action. And then the scene launches, right? So like all of the boring stuff is supposed to happen off camera before the film is rolling. And so when you actually go to the movies and see DS dynamics, you're seeing everything that happened after somebody called action. So don't expect to see the boring stuff. The second part of it, and you brought up like Julieta Chiara had this video about, she said like, I'm not going to have any entitled subs in my cohort or coven or whatever. And so she is very forward about submissive's responsibility. And I really like that approach. But I think that what is getting brought up, or at least what was brought up for me, is that everything that we do exists within context. And our relationship with consenting power dynamics is a reflection of not just our experience with non-consenting power dynamics, but also what I call obligatory power dynamics. These are the ones that you do out of necessity and out of dependence, like your family, your work, cultural, religion. You know, we do them and we call them like, I'm choosing my job and I'm choosing elements of my lifestyle and everything. But the reality is we're dependent on those things, and it's not fully consenting. It is this gray area. Most people are only going to have experience with obligatory and non-consenting power dynamics. This whole idea of consenting power dynamics is quite revolutionary. And it has been this theory for centuries. I mean, if we go back to like the inception of America, what was trying to be accomplished with the Constitution, it was this wild theory of like, what if we gave white men ultimate authority to do whatever they wanted and practice whatever they wanted and had free will, had consenting free will to do whatever they wanted? What could be accomplished in this novel land? And clearly things didn't work out because they didn't give the consent to everybody. It was still based on an oppressive structure. Yeah. But it was the idea, this first idea that we bring consent to a governmental institution. Circling back on the submissive topic, when folks come in and are expecting their DOMs to do everything and set up all of that framework, they're doing it from the perspective of a patriarchal structure where they're used to their boss giving them all the instructions and like, here's the framework of how do you do your job, or the father leading the family and giving them the structure. So they're used to it from the obligatory framework. And then when you're put into a fully consenting framework, like, baby doll, you are all on your own. Like, you have to show up 50% and really investigate what your free will is wanting of you. Such a massive question that I never thought would be so difficult. But for the folks that I mentor, the first question I ever ask them in the program is, what do you want? And I swear existential crises like abound from that one question. And it's particularly, all of my clients right now are women, only one of them straight, but they're coming from a perspective that I don't have.
Wait, all of your clients are women and only one of them is straight, or only one of them is not straight?
Only one of them is straight.
All of your female clients are queer, or?
Yes.
Okay. Because all of my clients right now, in the past, I've had more variety. All of my clients are heterosexual cis, like cis hetero, all of them right now. So I think I had a moment of like, wait, what? Our audiences are different, or our clients are different, which is, I love that the right people are finding us. Sorry, I just had to pause because like, does he really mean that? And you do. Okay. Everyone else is.
Yeah. I mean, it's a coincidence. I don't have the statistics or the longevity to say that that's like a real pattern.
Yes.
It is what it is. But, you know, I recognize that they're coming from a different perspective than I am. And therefore, oftentimes when we open mentorship with just the simple question of, what do you want out of this? They crack because they've never been able to actually consider that before. They've never considered, like, what do you mean I get to design a dynamic? I get to design my whole future and I get to have whatever I want. Like, that's never been an option for me. I've always come from this obligatory submissive space where I am supposed to be agreeable and I'm supposed to blend in and go along with whatever dad wanted or whatever the current structure is.
How do you get them to start answering that question for themselves?
It's just a lot of time and patience. And I try to reframe the relationship with selfishness off of the pejorative. And it brings up a lot of shame because in so many family structures, the idea of thinking for oneself is tampered with shame. Like, how dare you have needs? You know, the needs of the family are the priority. And within the family structure, the needs of father are of the highest priority. And so I just have to back off with a lot of patience, and they're going to fill out their answer. They're going to come up with it. And then I just continue to challenge them. And what else, and what else, and what else, and what else? You have to give them the space that they've never had before.
That's very true. I love that that is the work you're doing, because I know that's a deep and hard question of what do you want, especially in the context of a dynamic where I think, in my experience, a lot of people are coming to it with this preconceived notion they're never going to find what they want, or it's very difficult. And I'm not saying it's easy, but that alone creates a barrier of owning what you want, because the fear steps in of, but what if I can't get it? Then I've possibly failed. Why did I even do this exercise in the first place? Fear and shame, I don't know which one's worse. But like, the shame causes a lot of fear too. So I love that you named that.
Yeah, I mean, the predominant culture is one of self-abandonment, and it affects men and women differently, but it's the experience we both have that in order to survive childhood, it is in our best interest to self-abandon and just go with whatever the predestined direction is. And then we go and develop all these neuroses and whatever. And then at some point, for some people earlier and some people later, we figure out we have to put the pieces back together again. And it's fascinating. My youngest client is 24. My oldest is 56, coming off of a divorce. So these are people that are like, you know, 24, you got like a really good chance of living the life that you want. 56, 2 kids later, divorced because she's kinky, mentioned it to her husband, and the husband was like, yeah, I can't support this.
Can't
So
support
like
it
that.
and asked for a divorce, or can't support it and she realized I needed it and she moved on.
Yeah, she led the charge. She said, I needed it. Pandora's out of the box. I can't put this back. So a lot of courage, like insane courage to go out on her own and stay true to herself. But just that loop in itself closes from the childhood conditioning that to self-abandon is the one true way of experiencing this world.
That's such a good point. Also, I do want to call out, I love that she had the courage to leave. For the people out there, and I experience this a lot, people don't want to bring it up because they imagine worst case scenario of kink. She did bring it up, and she's the one who chose to leave. It wasn't he found out and left. And it's so rarely, almost, I haven't had it in my practice happen yet where someone brings it up and the other person is like, I'm leaving. It's usually like, I can't do that. And then you move on from there, but it's not an immediate, like you bring it up and the person just walks away. I always like to point that out because I know that there's a lot of fear around mentioning it at all.
Yeah. So a lot of the DMs I get, a lot of the questions I get in the comments, a lot of the folks that come to Subspace, which you alluded to earlier, it's a community support group that I host on Zoom every other Sunday, and it's free. So if you look me up on social media, it's in my links. A lot of those folks are in that position where they're elder millennial or they're Gen X, and they're having their awakening in their 50s and 60s. And then it's like, what the hell do I do with this? And it's fascinating for me because I'm hearing, this is primarily heterosexual couples. I'm hearing the husband's perspective, and they're liberal couples. And the response from the husband is like, I just could never hit you. Like, I could never spank you. I could never get a paddle. I could never tie you up. I couldn't do that. That would just go against everything that I've identified myself with as a progressive person over the last 60 years or something. And that is a common Dom experience for folks that I've talked to, of like getting over this hurdle that there's two truths here. You can impact somebody through pain and give them pleasure and consent, whatever. That's the whole topic or conversation. But there's an instinct in our head to not hurt, that we have to get over. And that is an exercise that doesn't come naturally. And the older you are, the harder it is to reverse that. So yeah, it takes a lot of courage to be able to sit with somebody that you've built an entire life with and had kids with and say, but this isn't me.
Yeah, it's all true. I mean, I work a lot with dominant men, also in that Gen X age range, where they want it so bad and they still have to go through that unconditioning themselves from having spent 60 years, like you've said, thinking, oh, I can't do this, I can't do this, but they want it. So if it's even hard for the people who want it, for the people it's being introduced and they want to do it for their partner, I imagine it's 10x of really pushing past the limitations in your mind.
Absolutely. And, for anyone listening, I'm a product of the latter. I'm 39 and I didn't plan any of this. I wasn't in kindergarten thinking like, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Well, it would have been real weird if you answered that.
Right. But my journey into this space was I was always just kinky and I never thought about power exchange ever. It wasn't something I ever investigated. But somebody that I was playing with asked me, and it was their curiosity. I don't want to say pressure, but it did feel like a pressure at the time that inspired me to investigate and learn more. And the whole time I was going through research, I just kept thinking like, oh, there's got to be more to this. It's got to be way more complicated. It can't be this simple. And I'm reading Anton Fullman's books and watching Evie Lupine and just absorbing everything I can and going to classes and everything. And I think the most nerve-wracking part for me in the position that I do as a dominant and someone that exchanges ideas is it actually is super damn simple, but it's really hard to implement. It's not this crazy algebra. I'm not good at math anyway, but it's not complex. I think anyone can do it.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear for folks that are like, I don't have the natural skill set to do it. No, you have everything you need to do it. It's just a reorganization of all the things that you've been led to believe.
I agree with that completely. I am a huge believer that you just have to tap into that dominant energy. It's there. It's about finding your path to it. When you said it was brought up to you and you felt a pressure, was it a pressure because you thought it was going to be complicated? Or can you tell me a little bit more about the pressure you felt?
Well, what immediately came up was abandonment wounds, thinking that if I don't stand up to this right now, this person will leave me. I did something wrong. I'm not man enough, all that self-criticism. So yeah, my immediate go-to is rejection. And then I have to check in with that. Now popular conversations around, quote, enthusiastic consent. The conversations are typically in regards to receiving enthusiastic consent and checking in and revocable consent and so on and so forth. But one of the things I really have to work on with people is the enthusiastic consent the individual has with themselves. And because I am a master at convincing myself to do things that I don't want to do, for better or worse. But I often find myself in environments and social situations are a big one where I'm standing there and go, I don't consent to this. How did I get here? Like, what the hell happened here? Like I just blinked and all of a sudden I'm in this uncomfortable situation that I knew was going to be like this. And the fact of the matter is, I believe consent is a muscle. I think it's an exercise. I think it's something to be strengthened and worked on. And due to the circumstances in which I grew up, I was taught and conditioned to forego my consent, in which case I did not have any opportunity to be enthusiastic about it. But as my nervous system learns to regulate around my own consent and free will, I can better identify what enthusiastic consent for me feels like. And with that as a measurement, I am much better at witnessing it in other people and communicating it as well.
That makes a ton of sense. I know there's online discourse about enthusiastic consent and whether you can expect that from your submissive or the person you're playing with. Does that mean that like your consent can be not enthusiastic but it's real, or do you need real enthusiastic consent for yourself? Like, what's your barrier now? Are you still showing up to these social situations where you're like, fuck, I didn't agree to this? It sounds like you didn't allow yourself to play the tape and make a decision of whether or not you wanted to be there. You just went for it. And then you were like, fuck, I'm here.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like enthusiastic consent is a really, really shitty brand move, like terrible marketing. It's just vague, right?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the disagreements happen, is when things are too vague. And enthusiasm is going to look different for everybody. So like, what are we even talking about here? But it gets down to this question of, where does consent actually live? Like, is it in the words that I speak when I say yes to something, or is it in my mind? Because those can be two different things. And then, okay, it's probably in my mind over my voice, but inside my mind, is that the only voice in my mind? No, I'm a big proponent of doing like IFS work, internal family systems.
Oh, yeah.
And I would expand it out to like an entire internal Congress or town hall. I believe that there's thousands of voices with different opinions and different votes in my head. So when I say consent, it's like some of them are saying yes, and a whole lot of them are saying no, and a whole lot of them are saying maybe, and some of them, like, who knows what they're saying. So where does my consent actually live? And again, getting back to like the birth of America kind of conversation, and this is where I identify as a kink theorist. Like, I'm not going to say that there's a real answer here, but these are questions worth asking and starting to explore. And I love being in this community because we're the ones doing it. Like, this could have been the job for the federal government. It could have been the job for Christianity or any of these other institutions. But the freaky people sticking stuff up each other's butts, we're the ones that are actually investigating this and moving it forward.
Yeah. I do have an answer of where my consent comes from, though. It's in my gut. When I was thinking about it, I was like, I do not consult the voices in my head at all. They're there. I'm not saying that it doesn't get me in the exact same situations you're describing, where I wake up and I'm like, holy shit, I've just moved 3,000 miles away. And did I really think it through? No, I did not. But my gut said go, and I go with it. I love that you described it the way you did, because to your point, consent lives in different places for different people, I think. But we all require it to be verbalized. And that's the hard part, because no matter what, the responsibility is on you, and the responsibility is on me for our mouth to say what we actually mean and to do those internal check-ins wherever they are. You know to go to your head. You know to talk to your Congress or however many people you need to. And I know to check in my solar plexus area of like, does it feel positive or negative here when I think about this outcome? And that's just something I wanted to shout out, because for me, I don't go to my head. Not saying that's right. It's just my version, and I'm not saying yours is wrong.
Yeah, certainly the body knows first. I don't know the exact statistic, but I do know that like the reptilian brain reacts and sends the signals to your body
Oh,
before, like a split
yeah.
millisecond before it sends to your cerebellum and prefrontal. And so, yeah, your nervous system is a great check-in. But something I wanted to bring up to your earlier question of like, how do I engage in enthusiastic consent? How do I practice it? To be honest, I don't think about it in those terms at all. And I don't really label consent in specific schools of thought as much as I do believe that as a dominant player, my role as a dominant begins well before I am the dominant player. And so I recognize that I'm being clocked and judged like from the second we make eye contact. Yeah. And from that moment until either we do a play scene or it gets into a dynamic or whatever, it is on me to set up conditions in which I am constantly providing trials for consent to be either given or taken away. In that case, it's in my best interest to be very, very proactive about things that I already know are going to come up in any scene or dynamic situation. Like at the end of my vetting process, and this is just for play scenes. If we're just play partners and I'm vetting, I'm going to go pick them up. We're going to go to the clinic and we're going to get tested together. I need to see them walk through the door. And this is to remedy my anxiety because I'm neurotic. But like, I need ultimate clarity. And therefore, not only is it to benefit me and my understanding, but it is also to provide the other player with the faith and the reassurance that I am considering the anxieties that they're probably having, but are too afraid to ask. Because one thing I've noticed about this culture is STI checking is kind of done haphazardly. It's not like part of a codified cultural event in the way that I make it into ritual. Mm-hmm. And so I know it'll come up. I know that they'll probably ask. I know that they'll look for screenshots or whatever, but I'm paranoid enough that I don't want to see screenshots. I want to walk into the clinic together. I want that absolute trust and reassurance because I want to be able to walk into a scene in full confidence. I don't want to have any hanging, lingering questions of we didn't cross I's and we didn't cross T's. And therefore, coming back to the consent thing, is that through all of these trials, I am making a case for consent. Yeah. I'm making a case for this is something that you can trust in, this is something that you can consent in. And it doesn't always go in my favor. Sometimes we go through those processes and they go, hey, this isn't my style, I'm out. And that is still the framework working. Because if it's not a fully consenting arrangement, then I want them to pull out beforehand. Yeah. So for me, consent in my practice is like 80% done before we even do anything. And then the rest from like when a scene starts, when a dynamic starts, whatever, is just maintenance after that.
That makes a ton of sense. It is sparking a couple of personal questions that I am going to ask you, but you do not have to answer. You just say pass. Are all of your partners now in your life, if they're in your life, it's also through a kink context? It sounds like it's not just, you don't have vanilla partners, is what I gathered or pieced together from the way you just described that. If it's Correct. Any type of kink. Okay. Do you do pickup play, like at a party? No, do you go to parties?
No. I reached out to you because I loved your podcast with your partner who's describing like the social anxiety of large environments. And I was just like, oh, thank God somebody said it. Like, I just thank God.
I commend him very much. He says the things that even I'm like, I don't say some stuff, but he has the benefit of also being faceless. And I think that helped him just say whatever he was thinking. But yes, someone said it. I understood it. So you relate to that.
Yeah, I try to submit to my desire. I try not to design my own desire, and I just try to listen to what those voices are. And for me, in order to do headspace and get what I want out of it and everything, the hardest thing is to suspend the disbelief that this is quote unquote real life, or like, Tripp's not my real name. So my government name, that person's life. And I am trying to get into the headspace where my dominant character is the reality. And anything that is too fantastical or out of the ordinary distracts me from that. So I have a really hard time at dungeons. I have a really hard time at play parties because the environment and the context are abnormal to what's convincing to me. It feels too contrived. And I like going as a social experience, but it's not something that I want to play in. Yeah.
No, that answers
That's
it
that
perfectly.
thought.
And I can relate when I go to these parties that I met my Dom at. I'd been going for a long time before I met him. I didn't play publicly because I wanted a connection with someone and I wanted to go back to the room and play. And for context, I think people know this, but I'm not talking about sex. I'm literally just talking about being spanked. But for me, it's sort of similar. Being in that environment took me out of the fantasy I wanted to get lost in to fully enjoy, and also the connection I was looking for with whoever I chose to play with. I do pickup play, but in a much more private setting. Pickup play being going to a party like this, meeting someone for the first time, doing some quick vetting, and then going to have that private scene. All of that makes total sense, but the question I ask a lot of people who live our lifestyle is, how do you meet people then?
Well, you start a TikTok
Yeah.
and
Publicly put your face out there.
no, actually, I've never met anybody off of TikTok or Instagram. I've mostly met people off FetLife and Field, friends of friends, just general social events. I'm not as community forward, I think, as one might expect or think. Again, like I had mentioned that I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. And social experiences are a lot on my nervous system, but I didn't know that that's what it was until very recently. And so I self-medicated with alcohol and drugs for 20 years. And then I had to go through that whole process and unpack all of that trauma and childhood stuff or whatever, and then come around to not just a physical sobriety of not drinking anymore, but working on an emotional sobriety of family stuff and all these kinds of things, just to get to a point where a psychiatrist has enough vision of the landscape to go, yeah, I think you have ADHD. Here's the test. And so I'm taking in all that information now and starting to see the truth of my own life and how I show up and don't show up in different environments. And so I'm kind of grieving, in a sense, the last 39 years. It doesn't feel authentic,
Yeah.
like, because I was lacking so much information. So will that change over the next decade? Possibly.
It could, and it doesn't have to. There's something I always say about the community. I've had this rule since the beginning that I try and impart on people. To enjoy kink, you don't have to be involved in the community. My only request is that you don't disparage the community. I don't want you talking shit on the community because so many people find what they need from it, but don't let anyone ever tell you you're not a real kinkster. This is not for you, Tripp, but don't let anyone tell you you're not a real kinkster if you're not going to the parties, if you're not involved in your local community. You can educate on your own. You just have extra responsibility of knowing you might have blind spots and you have to go looking for those. But other than that, until I found spanking parties and something that aligned fully with my fetish, I wasn't really involved in the community either, except for the social aspect of it sometimes, because I was like, at least they understand kink, I think a lot of people do expect creators to like live and breathe it every single day, and kink can look so many different ways. And I think that we're out here showing that.
Yeah, if you're going to make content or work in this industry in any capacity, you have to make the decision of what's going to be my private life and what's going to be public. And I could present all of it. I'll talk about my personal experiences, and I know that's stuff people sink their teeth into, but at the same time is I really want my experiences with partners to be special. If it's everywhere, then there's no separation between work and my personal life. There's no separation between church and state. And then there's nothing that makes that special. And I have to make up that boundary at every crossroads. I will share some pretty intimate stuff, and then somebody will ask me a question about it. And I'm like, hard boundary. No, We're shutting this down. And you just have to navigate that according to the consent in your gut.
So Tripp, if I wanted to, well, I know where you are, but where can everyone find you?
Sure. So Tripp Terrier on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads. Tripp Terrier on FetLife. I, again, am not super active in my community because I work a lot. I'm a bad kinkster, but I try to be available to answer people's questions when I have the capacity for it. And if you are new or experienced, I invite everyone to come check out Subspace. Again, it is a community of folks that hold space for each other and support each other. We meet every other Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And the sign-up link is going to be link in bio on my Instagram or TikTok. It's completely free. Just come by and hang out and listen. You don't have to participate if you don't want to.
As I said, a speaker at one of those. So sometimes you bring other people in to speak about their experience too. So it's like a learning opportunity without the fear of the algorithm getting angry at you. So it's very open conversation. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. There's not a great bridge between the anonymity of social media and the in-person kink world, or even like FetLife, I guess, is somewhere in between there. And so when I was doing Subspace or organizing it, a lot of people wanted it to be a Discord, and I tried a Discord before, but the difference it makes to be able to hear somebody's voice and see them if they have their camera on is so much more intimate. And we're lacking third spaces, and this is a superficial third space, but it is getting us off the anonymity, and just being seen as a kinkster is such a big deal and so healing. So like that's the kind of intimacy that I want to promote for folks that don't have access to it.
I would highly recommend it. I've attended. The group is fantastic. It was all women. All of your mentees are women as well. Is that by design? I just want to be clear. Is this just for submissive women, this group?
It's not. I say it's for submissives and switches. People don't usually come out and identify, so I don't know who's a submissive and I don't know who's a switch. And I just kind of make my content immediately. As soon as I started uploading it, my following was 95% women. And I don't know how to talk to guys.
No, that's okay.
What that is. But I think that, again, there is a community gap between this massive influx of interest coming from the smut books into the kink world. And I think in some kink spaces, they see that social media kink as illegitimate or not to be taken seriously. And my perspective is they're coming whether we like it or not. The awakening is happening, and it's our choice to welcome them at the door or not. And in my earlier life, I was a journalist, and it just reminded me a lot of the way that underground house and techno treated EDM when that was really big in 2012. Well, a lot of those EDM kids ended up being prolific underground house and techno DJs with enough time. I see the pipeline of how these things are going to open up, and I would rather be a bridge and welcome them in and make sure that they have a seat and space and be called a TikTok dom. I'm a whatever. If that's important to you, then that's fine. But I feel responsibility and obligation as someone who's going to identify as a dominant and a leader to actually espouse those qualities, not just in my personal life, but online also.
That makes a ton of sense. And what you described, I'm aligned with, because I am very against the old guard. And one of my first things that made me make a TikTok was I hated being introduced to the kink community when I was in my mid-20s in New York City. And I came up a lot against the old guard who told me it could only be one way and it had to be XYZ. And the further down the road I got in kink, the more I realized what a lie that was. And maybe that was true for them at a time, but it's no longer the reality. So them trying to keep it that way is potentially harming exactly what you're trying to embrace right now. Welcoming everyone so that we have better conversations, it's more open, and everyone's a lot more aware because they don't feel they have to hide from what the old guard said is important. Wow, now that was my soapbox moment.
Especially for the young people out there that are teens and 20s, you have such an incredible opportunity to carve this path and like actually direct the ship. Kink is not that old, or like BDSM as an American institution is not that old. Kink is not that old here. People will quote, there was hieroglyphs or something in Pompeii of people whipping each other, whatever. But the fact is they didn't see that as kink back then. Kink is a relational practice as a reflection of a Western Puritan culture. And we are an aberrant by design relative to Puritanism. And in that lens, that is very new. So if you're getting into the community and you're trying to find your space and you're trying to assimilate, you have a lot of room to carve your own path and do whatever you want. The whole idea of a one true way or an old guard, it's like the culture's not old enough to even necessitate an old guard. The whole thing is new, you know?
That's such a good point. The whole thing is new. The way I always thought of it, though, was like the 80s were a rough time, and this group of people banded together and solidified, and what kept them safe at the time was being like, it can only be this way, but that's not the world we're living in anymore. The world moves faster than that. So you're right, though. This idea that there's an old guard, and we're talking about from the 80s or the 70s, is semi-ridiculous.
I was born in the 80s.
Me
what
too.
do you mean?
No, me too. I was like, wait, what? Tripp, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I have loved talking to you today. You've definitely made an impression, not just on this podcast, but through the work you're doing. And I'm so excited to follow along as you grow your online presence and including all of your mentorships and stuff. It's been
a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words and everything you do and giving people space to express themselves in a more deep format. Because you're right, social media clips kind of just don't really do it justice.
Sadly, no.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.